Zella here again for Small Business Digest. The world is changing, especially for small business. If we don't improve the way we do things, we're going to be left in the dust. Well, Roger Lang has a new company. He's a serial entrepreneur, and he's here to tell us about it. But first, we're going to ask him about his personal background, and then a little bit about his company, and finally, a website. Roger, welcome to the program.
Hey, thanks so much, Don. Yeah, I've got 40 years under my belt. As you can see, I'm not a spring chicken. I was kind of given birth professionally to the early days of the Silicon Valley. And so I started companies while I was still at Stanford. From the beginning, there was an analytical software beginning to my fascination. The deregulation that Thatcher and Reagan performed on the global capital markets left a wide open opportunity for brand new topics like software. How can you make regression analyses? How can you make analytics helpful to people who are capital markets practitioners in a newly deregulated space? So we were building these things from scratch on PCs that showed up at the undergraduate library. And they were empty. So we had to learn things like languages to code, like BASIC and Pascal. Ultimately, that led to my first couple of companies. And two of the first three companies I started IPO'd in those early days in the 90s. So I've had experience as an analytical software guy, as a founding CEO, and first capital in that kind of early entrepreneurial experience, and so I have functional experience as well as domain experience in analytical software. The other thing I would add about my origin story, Don, is that somewhere along the way I recaptured my fascination with sustainability. So rather than just building software for derivatives traders and how to manage the risk of those unruly financial vehicles, I really wanted to make an impact in conservation, within the single biosphere that we have. So I bought a ranch and practiced conservation on the ground, resurrecting some endangered species of trout, learning how to run cattle with wolves, which is not an easy thing to do on a vast expanse of Montana. And I really became bit by we only have one Earth. Let's do something about it. And so what Predicta, as we roll forward now, if I bring you up to where we are today, it's a company that assesses competitive landscapes in minute detail. So how to compare a Jeep with a Land Rover, for example, in explicit detail. But also layer in the topic of sustainability. What is actually gentler on the Earth? What is gentler in the biosphere? What's gentler in the atmosphere? What's gentler in terms of, this whole thing we're hearing about despeciation, the sixth extinction? How are we gentler to the other cousins that cohabitate with us on this planet? So now you know who I am. I'm driven by technology, analytical software, but I'm also driven by let's be lighter in our footprint on the planet Earth. And so that's kind of an introduction to my background and where you find me today.
That's pretty darn good. And your website for the company we're about to talk about.
The website is www.predicta.com. That's PREDICTA.com. The name Predicta is kind of a catchy name that implies that we have some analytics that can forecast or help you see into the future, predict things. But a lot of AI, we use what's called natural language processing, which is a function of artificial intelligence writ large. It's not so much predicting. What it is doing is extrapolating from historic scientifically gathered data sets so that you can draw trend lines into the future that help you make more educated decisions. If the legacy of Predicta is to help businesses make smarter decisions, then I'm all excited about that. And if the legacy can also be further parlayed into how do EVs truly help the CO2 problem that leads to global warming, then even better. And so I think of Predicta as an analytical software company that has two wings that help make the bird fly, but ultimately it's about making capitalist decisions. It's not a socialist phenomenon. The capitalist brand companies make better decisions vis-a-vis an ever-shrinking globe and vis-a-vis ever-tightening competitive landscape with an eye towards sustainability. That's Predicta, www.predicta.com.
Okay, well, let's delve a little deeper. Let me see if I understand. If I have a product, and let's say it's a new car, an EV, I use your software to figure out what is the best way of producing that car or selling that car.
Think of it as a life cycle of any product. All right. So let's say there's a company that's a classic combustion engine company and they make four-wheel drive sports utility vehicles. All right. That company might want to ideate what an EV looks like, from bumper and overall aesthetic design all the way to performance and drivetrain, from battery to axles, how to make it run, and then maintenance issues. But there's an ideation, so there's an early design. Then there's engineering reality. Okay, we've done some design, let's bracket that by our functional realities. What are our constraints? And then there's, let's go to work. Let's put money into the project of actually developing. So the life cycle of a product from initiation starts to take shape. Then there's a product, and you have to test it before you want to launch it. You want to get some early consumer, early adopter reviews before you might have to tweak it again. Maybe it's a pre-version one. And then there's okay, we've settled on it. Then there's a product launch. And then after you launch that product, then you have to see if it's competing well. So you might have launched it with the wrong messages. So you got to understand what the consumers are thinking about that product, what they're feeling about that product, how are they using that product, what are their sentiments about things, which features were they drawn to at the point of sale, what's causing problems at the maintenance level. So there's this whole world of a product life cycle that it starts from ideation, and ultimately you have a product that's so long of tooth that can't compete no matter how many times you tweak the message, because you have to sunset that product. So this notion of a product life cycle is what our AI simplifies. It takes this whole world of consumer feedback, whether it's from surveys or random unstructured chatter that's out there about your product that we find, and then concatenates that unstructured data into very simple, intuitive graphic presentations so you can start making smart decisions. Oh, Lexus is beating me in this feature. It's beating me in this sentiment. They're more trustworthy as dealership. We better up our game. And sometimes that's messaging, and sometimes that's going back to the drawing board and making a better product. And that's what our software does: help people compete better, make smarter decisions in a competitive environment. And it's not relegated to cars. You kicked off this discussion, Don, with, in order for us to remain competitive, and I'm assuming you meant as a country vis-a-vis competitors like, say, China on the horizon, but also as a company relative to other competitors, in order for us to succeed, we have to embrace the technological gains that are at our fingertips rather than do things the old way. And so the new way is not something we should be fearful of. The tsunami is coming. We might as well learn how to surf it rather than get slammed by it. And what technology, if you embrace it, can do is just help you make those smarter decisions. That's why we've put things into an intuitive graphic presentation. But it's not just for the behemoths, the giant $100 billion CPG companies like Procter and Gamble or L'Oreal or Tyson Foods. It's for the little guy too. In order to break into a market, small, medium businesses have to have the tools that the big boys have. Now, are you going to go to Palantir for your commerce assessment at $1 million a shop if you're a mom and pop shop doing 20 million a year making pen knives? No. But you do need something that gives you the same efficacy, the same ingenuity, the same insights that the big boys have. And that's what AI at the push of a button can now do, even for the small companies that otherwise wouldn't have a chance to raise enough money to break into the game of marketing or research about how consumers are thinking, feeling, acting about with their products.
Okay, Roger, let me give you an example, which just came across my desk this morning, as a matter of fact. But we know someone who believes that she has a viable product, which is customized clothes that you do via the internet. Okay? Now there's at least 12 or 13 companies that I know of in the field. Is that something that she could then say, come to your system, your product company, and say, what do I have to do to make my product successful?
Yeah.
Is that the type of thing you're talking about?
Yeah, let me take the discussion to a slightly higher level. Rather than some consumer packaged good that has been on the shelf for years and everybody knows what it stands for, Crest toothpaste versus Colgate toothpaste. Let's go to your example here. For us, it's just another topic that needs to be analyzed. The topic in this case, if you know 12 or 13 companies that are attempting to customize at some mass level, you have to be able to automate that customization, and you have to be able to still compete at some level of scale, so it's not just a series of loss leaders or one-offs that drive your administrative costs through the roof. So they're using technology in order to solve this. So your question is okay, let's assume that mass customization takes off as a service for people who want to buy clothes, shoes, even cars, whatever that can be configured to exactly my needs, okay? Now I want to compare those 12 to 13. And by the way, I know another 10, so maybe that number's 24, all right? Maybe there's a lot of these companies that are attempting to customize, to tailor, to suit my personal needs, at the same time attempting to scale their business, all right? Well, that's just another topic. Where would consumers of these mass customization services go to chat about it? They're probably not chatting about it on review boards at Amazon. They're probably not chatting about it at review boards at Kelley Blue Book for used cars and what people's thoughts are. But they're probably talking in blogs and forums and chatting, saying, hey, I'm looking at this group. Converse allows me to monokerize my tennis shoes. Adidas does not. What are you guys finding? Was it reliable? Was it accurate? Did the colors show up on time according to what you wanted for your high top sneakers? Where are they chatting about it? That's what we have to find. What our AI does is identify whatever the user wants as a topic. I want to look at mass customization clothiers to see if it meets my needs. And then they want to go read up on and engage a community of other people who are chatting about their experiences. Those are found typically at blogs and forums, but you also find consumer reviews. You can find professionals weighing in who say a professional consumer reports, a version that I don't know about right now because we're making a fictitious moment here with mass customization companies. What if there is that group out there that writes about that, says, you know what, we've studied all 24 of the mass customization services for your perfectly tailored summer dresses, all right? Then there's going to be some follow-on discussion based on that professional's assessment. But we could start with that professional's vernacular, the words that person uses, the phrases, the sentiments that are imparted, and get a backdrop on what this new space might be like, and then be able to slot in the consumers so that we can track how do professionals think about this new emerging market and how do consumers think and feel about this new emerging market. Because I guarantee you they're going to be speaking and thinking differently based on experiences. Consumer reports types in the early days often provide us just with the backdrop against which we can measure very quickly consumer thoughts, feelings, sentiments, and use cases, et cetera. But yeah, that's just another, Don, that's just another topic. The world of artificial intelligence divided a while ago between sort of analyzing people as demographics and their tastes and their inclinations versus topics that they are reading or watching if they're movies or buying if they're products. And we've decided to focus on the topics. That's referred to in the AI circles as topic modeling. And we are squarely a topic modeling company. Predicta is a topic modeler. So your question could be applied to from pen knives to media sources. How does the Washington Post stack up against the New York Times according to their targeted demographic? Cars, emerging SUVs that are EV. How do they compare to Tesla, which is sort of the giant in that space as they emerge with a Rivian? The Rivian beat the Tesla truck. So there's not a lot of consumer data about the Tesla truck, but there is consumer data trickling in about the Rivian. But there's a lot more consumer professionals, consumer review professionals who have written about the Tesla over the past 10, 15 years than about Rivian. So they're two separate buckets. Those are worth comparing. And people who have to make a living figuring out how to compete need to be able to get access to this in a digested way. You can't go read 80 terabytes of reviews. You can't go read 10,000 articles. When you go to Yelp to look at your choices of dinner tonight, you might look at, oh, it's 4.3 versus 4.5 stars. And then you say, okay, I need more information than that. So you go to the actual comments. You're not going to read 10,000 or even 100. You're going to read 5 and get some notional, directionally correct. That's too small of a data set. What AI does, what Predicta does, is do the heavy lifting of analysis of all this unstructured data for you so you don't have to sift through thousands of reviews. And it's all scientifically presented so that you can make your comparative analyses with intuitive graphic charts and graphic displays so that the AI did the heavy lifting and work for you, whether you're a consumer or a professional marketeer who needs to make a smarter decision tomorrow when you wake up and something hit you and blindsided you because the world is now characterized by unending disruptions by your competition. And so now you know what Predicta does. We're having a go at it in a couple of different vertical markets. We started out in outdoor recreation. We've ended up doing some automotive work. We worked in a consulting basis with big companies in cosmetics and alternative foods. We think one of the disruptive things for the food world that will be also more sustainable are plant-based alternatives for protein sources. Whatever your predilection is, that's a good bet in an investment for the future. I want to understand these disruptive, ever-changing markets. EVs are clearly one of those. And actually disruption is happening everywhere you look. The old printed magazines and newspapers are being replaced by online journals. The online journals can be for-profit and non-profit. Those business models are being upended almost on an annual basis, right? I live out here. Go ahead, Don. Go ahead.
No, you first. You're the guest. Keep going, please.
All right. What I was going to say was I live out here in Montana, where like the two cities that have universities, Missoula and Bozeman, have local newspapers. And I still read the newspapers. I want to read everything from the police reports to the local gossip to the things locals care about and some of the big issues, you know. How did the pandemic affect real estate prices? Well, a lot of urbanites are moving into rural small towns. Well, guess what? Right when people need access to information most, they stopped reading these printed newspapers. The Missoulian in Missoula has cut its staff down to bare bones. They had to basically cater to one faction or another, you know, in our weird polarized world of left versus right. And so it's basically become an opinion rag as opposed to a community journalism entity. and so now people have to go online to social media venues that they trust, to nonprofits, for-profits. Where are the blogs? So I can go get information about the role of, say, public landowners versus public people who want to come and fish and hunt on my land, because these are rural communities. And the newspapers are potentially going the way of all things, like dinosaurs, giving way to something. And so guess what? Your world of new media, look at you, here we are doing a podcast on new media. That's taking over because people need to have the information to make their smarter decisions, and they're not getting it. So there's a topic that is in disruption: media. So I could easily point this to media companies, not just consumer packaged goods.
I couldn't agree with you more. Being an old newspaper man myself, I prefer much more to be a newspaper man than being a podcaster. Believe me when I tell you that. But that brings me to the subject I've been saving up for you, because the book publishing world is a world of hit and miss. Okay. Now, it just happens that I've just sold my trilogy, historical fiction trilogy. But my question to you is, can your system identify who the audience would be for a historical fiction book about an unsung American hero, military hero?
Well, if in the world of identifying demographics, versus identifying what that demographic thinks and feels about the topic, we've chosen to identify an AI that can pick apart the topic of your readers and how they react to it. So think about this. I couldn't tell you necessarily who's reading it. And by the way, there are a lot of privacy laws that prohibit AI from getting too explicit about who's reading it. Is it a 16-year-old young woman who likes this kind of lipstick, who lives in Des Moines, Iowa, who reads your trilogy? Or is it an aging gentleman like yourself or myself who finds this stuff as a historic piece? You know, we can pick apart certain amounts, but in big bucketed demographics, okay? What I could tell you explicitly, however, would be what they're thinking, feeling, when they choose to read it. I like reading this on a hot summer day when it's too hot to go outside. I want to have my Arnold Palmer next to me. This is my go-to read after I have a golf game. I can tell you the context that they think, feel, and how they use your product, what they feel about your product at the sentiment level, chapter 13. I can go into detail about features, but I'm not going to focus on the specifics of the demographic. So there are groups out there, Don, that can help you target your sales relative to demographics. Which bookstores move trilogies like mine better than other bookstores? which online blogs and forums talk about the product I have. We focus more on what they're thinking, feeling, and how they're using your product rather than where they're best sell it. So hopefully that's clear.
Well, that clarifies it. Roger, let's in a few minutes. I'm a small business. I've decided that I want to take my pottery. Let's talk about making pottery. I want to take my pottery and sell it around the world. Is that? I'm trying to get for my audience, which is small business, 100 employees or less, how your product can benefit them.
Well, right now I've been selling direct to larger companies to pay the bills, but right around the corner, so be on the lookout for a Predicta self-service, which if you are a small business owner, you would log into Predicta's website, predicta.com, and open up an account and say, this is my email, these are my products, and answer a few questions like, help us better understand who you think your competition is, or give us the product category. Ceramic vases, 2 feet tall, matte finish, not glossy or glazed, whatever the description is. We then go find who the competition is and where people are talking about that product category. We then bring back the thoughts, feelings, use cases of that small business's product based on a completely automated process from data names, the product names, through the gathering, which is all unstructured data out there and informal circles, could be Reddit, could be Facebook, could be TikTok, could be probably not consumer reviews for a small business pottery manufacturer, but there are probably blogs and forums of artist communities, of craftsmen, places in open air markets where people go online and chat about it. And that's what we go find, all right? And then we bring that into a structured, cleansed set of data points that we throw through our AI mill, the grist for the mill, and out will pop the graphic displays, the graphic presentations that person who all they did was log in. We will do their products, or at least one product line, as sort of a freebie. But if they have multiple product lines, we got to charge for that. It'll all be self-service. And if they want to do competitive analyses, which artisanal pottery maker in Salinas is outdoing me, that'll cost as well, but it'll be self-service. Right now, we sell directly to the larger companies who have the same problems, by the way, of understanding what their consumers think and feel and how they use their products. So hopefully that answers the question. But the goal of Predicta is to democratize highest level market research, competitive market research, so that it's not just somebody who can go spend a million or 10 million on a Palantir contract. Think of this as Palantir for the little guy in a commercial sense.
Well, Roger, on that note, we unfortunately have to call it a day. We've gone over in time, but it was well worth it. Thank you so much for joining us, Roger Lang. One last time, your website?
The website is www.predicta.com. Predicta.
On that note, we say thank you so much for me, an illuminating time. Thank you.